teething, teasing, drifting out, screaming, reeling, turned without, dust-soaked stacks of magazine parties, silhouettes wink, blasphemous carvings, mixing, fixing, retwisting smiles, eyes wide shut, you're alone for miles, locked you were shocked and froze to light, hovering fangs and the camera's bright, turned away from your maze in a haze through the pipes, drugged by the beach as you reach all the stripes.
Sam Greenall, a trumpet player, he introduced me to jazz, and of course because he was a trumpet player, I had to play something else. So I persuaded my father to buy me a clarinet, and that's what I started on. And I played clarinet with lots of different bands and people, you know. I used to go to this youth centre up near the North End, Trinity I think it was called or something. Okay. And they had what we used to call them a radiogram, a big thing, and people used to take records and play them, you know. And there was one guy who offered to clarinet lessons. So I think I only had one lesson from him, and I was largely sort of self-taught anyway. Well, I'd only be about 17, 16 maybe. And I was born in 1931, so what does that make me? I know I was 18 years old and I decided I was going to be a jazz musician. That's what I was going to be. And that's what I have been. Not so much the different rhythmic things, but it's more creative. If you're playing, most jazz musicians and bands, they don't play from music. Even they've got it up here.
Music's always been a part of my life, I guess. Ever since I was growing up, my mum and dad have always been really into music, stuff like happy hardcore and garage and Wigan Pier, that sort of thing. My earliest memories of music were hearing those sorts of tracks from my bedroom. So at night times, when my mum and dad would be downstairs having a bit of a session and a bit of a party, we'd hear these songs pumping through the ceiling. And eventually we worked out that what we could hear was mainly just the beat because it was pumping through the ceiling. So we just started rapping, started coming up with these raps over these beats, and that's sort of where I began.
I was actually hitching to a festival down in Lincoln, and a couple gave me a lift, and they lived in Tarleton, Alan and Sheila. And I stayed with them for the festival, drove up, they dropped me back off here, and then they contacted me back through Bob Harris on the radio years ago. Very strange, yeah. Funny days then when they gave out a phone number over the radio, but that was like early 70s. And then I just kept in contact. I used to hitch down for gigs, and then eventually just moved down here. Preston was great for me because, apart from meeting this couple, and they were great and into the same music as well as me. Where I lived in Stranraer, the boats come from Ireland, and Preston was the first hub. So the trucks came here, and then they were changing over. So getting a lift to Preston was so easy. There was no problem. Back in 72 and that, the Guildhall had just opened up, and back then everybody played there, so it was fantastic. Plus it was very central, you know, Manchester, Liverpool. It was just right in the centre. For me it was great position.
In terms of learning music, I kind of got into it fairly early because where I grew up, well, I didn't grow up in the UK. It was a prestige project of my parents, as it was with very many people who were born into the middle and upper classes around me. If it wasn't music, it was ballet or some other suitable pursuit. So I began early. I began when I was 3. Now, it helped that I enjoyed what I was being pushed into. But you know, like very many trophy children, I was expected to just play for enjoyment, play up to a dilettantish level, and that was it. Writing my own music, now that was a different thing, because I was fairly exposed to video games at the time. The Nintendo Entertainment System, which was out in the 80s, wasn't exactly popular in the UK, but it was certainly popular in Asia, where I grew up. And we were all still playing the NES right up till the 2000s. I certainly was. And I remembered a lot of the tunes from those games. Well, initially, I didn't even know how you made music on a computer. I mean, up until my 20s, I didn't even know what a digital audio workstation was, which is basically the software that you use to produce music on, for the most part. I didn't even know what a digital audio workstation was. So I had an upright piano. I had a phone that recorded in terrible AMR quality. You know the kind, Chris. Yeah, I can hear you laughing in the back. Yeah, you know the kind. I had one of those. I had my voice, and I had Audacity. I made AMRs of my piano playing and my voice, separate takes, mashed them into Audacity with no knowledge of peaking and balancing audio, and that was it. That was my first means of actually putting together something that people could listen to.
Oh, you just go in, because, you know, before, when I started playing, it doesn't matter how old you are, because people at that age, in this sort of mid to late 70s, people were 14 were in the pubs, because that's where the music was. So it's not a case of you just want to go to get pissed. That's where the music was. So that's where you were. No, it's all organic. It starts if you find out about it because the music press, and then you listen to John Peel, and that's it. That's all you've got media-wise, and the rest you have to make up yourself. And various entrepreneurs in every pocket of England would become managers, would rent out clubs and pubs anywhere they could get hold of. People create their own magazines, you know, they create their own clothes. It's all DIY because nobody had any money, did they?
Yeah, I mean, there's everyday reality, and that's, you know, it can be quite grim sometimes. And music is, you know, it's not just an escape, but it can help you engage with it in a different way. Even when I'm I have tunes if I'm really down, you know what I mean? I have tunes if I want to galvanise myself to do something. I have tunes for, you know, if I'm feeling wistful and contemplative, you know. But it's just always there. Well, for me, it's just always there, you know. It's just, I always have it playing when I'm doing anything. I've always been a listener, really, because I was convinced until I was about 28 that I was going to be an artist, you know, a comic artist, and that's what my father did, and I was quite into it. But then as time went on, I realised my writing was better, so I focused on that instead, really. And then, but there's not much of that going on anymore because I'm doing this. I've just managed to get into a full-time teaching job, teaching secondary school English. Hated it, desperately unhappy. Basically had a nervous breakdown. Just luckily though, the opportunity came up for that job, which wasn't that at all. When I got the job, it wasn't that at all. It was about, I think I was supposed to be some sort of volunteer coordinator or something or whatever, but it just didn't end up that way. And I think I wasn't even supposed to be programming the venue when I started there. It was necessity. It was just like, I'm supposed to be looking after these shows that had been brought in, but nobody was bringing anything in, so I had to take the initiative and do it myself. And here we are 12 years later, and it's you know, probably the best functioning event room in town, you know, best gig venue in town.
I know when I saw Count Basie band playing in London, and that for some reason or other, they all piled on this aeroplane and came to London, and all the music went off to Stockholm. So they played, and I was there, a concert in the Royal Festival Hall, and they'd no music, but they just played the band. It was like, as good as a band. I saw them in Germany before that, and that one of the jazz critics, he's asking, the lead alto player, he said, well, I suppose you'd be playing like stuff that you've been doing recently. Hell no, he said. Bill was pulling out some old numbers I hadn't played for years to see if we still remember them. From like Bunk Johnson to New Orleans jazz. But I think my favourite interpreter of the poem of any popular song or whatever was Sonny Rollins. He could transmute dross into gold. Him playing, I don't know if I heard him play it was just with bass and drums, and he played this an album called Way Out West, and it's called I'm an Old Cow Hand, and then Wagon Wheels, and Wagon Wheels becomes an anthem, and there's only bass and drums with him. That's the way he plays it, you know. You can feel the passion, the emotion, you know. And that's what I liked about jazz was you could interpret a song that you felt you could change it, alter a note here, leave a note out there, put a couple of notes in. It was more creation. It's like Wayne Shorter said, improvising is composing very quickly. He said, and composing is improvising slowly. And that sums it up for me.
In Preston, there were quite a few different people. I spent a lot of my childhood, like when I was like 6, 7, 8 years old, watching some of the older lads coming up through the scene. Not a lot of these people are like mainstream people, but very underground local lads. So you have people like Chambo, Montana, Mondo, Gizmo, were just a few of the names that I grew up listening to. Montana was part of a group called Majestic Militants, I believe. And like Chambo, Mondo, Gizmo, they was all part of Triple C and CCY, which was Clean Cut Connection, and CCY was like a sister kind of group for like the younger ones, so it was Clean Cut Youngers. And that's where like Mondo and Gizmo first started, and these are guys who are still going today. You know, they're really doing good things. Like I've worked with Gizmo quite a bit as I've got older. But I remember it so vividly when I was younger, listening to this one specific track, and it just it reminded me so much of like Eminem and all these other mainstream artists who were doing really, really good things in the world of hip hop and rap. And it's that sort of thing that inspired me to try it myself, because I thought, well, if this guy who Montana's from Chorley, if he can do it and he can reach me and can affect me in such a way, I thought maybe I could do the same for somebody else.
Then the PlayStation 2 came about, and it was a huge hit in the 2000s, and I played a number of games whose music I remembered just like that. And one such game was Kingdom Hearts 1. Well, the very first Kingdom Hearts that came out in 2002. Hearing what went into the tonality of those loops, I just took one listen to it and I said, you know what, I can do this stuff too. And that was it. That was what got me into writing music.
My background from when I was in my 20s, I was a punk and I was into metal and things like that, so I know quite a few people on that scene, you know. Subhumans, Misfits, Dead Kennedys, you know, but I was a bit of a punk train spotter really, because I used to get the compilations and I used to collect them. So it was that and sort of psychedelic music as well, you know, and that kind of thing. Hip hop more latterly. The Damned were a big favourite, so I saw them about 12 times I think. I've just got really strange taste, that just all sorts of folk and all sorts, you know. I mean, doing the job has actually led me on to so many different sorts of music that I wasn't particularly interested in before, and now I'm actually finding myself interested in them and knowing a bit about them.
I started off, like I say, as a traddy clarinet player, and I was an apprentice sheet metal worker, so I was deferred from the National Service, which was only deferred until we were 21. In the army, there are two sorts of bands. There are the staff bands, which they are the creme de la creme,
Right.
and then there's the line bands, In the line bands, you're not even a musician. You're a bandsman. That's your rank. In the staff bands, you just decide what you got. You only take the first call. But apart from that, especially if you're in one of the guards bands in London, you can go out doing gigs. Of course, we went out to Germany, which wasn't bad. I enjoyed that. Thanks to a friend of my father's who was a foreman when I was an inspector, when I was an apprentice. He made sure that I had a very good education in sheet metal work, and I was good. I was 18. I was good as any of the men. In fact, I joined this band before I was 21. But I made the point of keeping that union card for this best part of a year, so I could go back to doing sheet metal work. No, I like two separate worlds, if you will. You know, I was composing, writing, and then I started teaching. Sometimes, not very often, perhaps not very much, but people will give you money to do something that you were going to do anyway.
I think the main thing for me about continuing is just because I have to. It's part of who I am. Without music, there is no Blakey. There is no me. It's a massive part of my life. I almost feel like, you know, if I stop, even if I didn't put music out ever again, if I stopped writing, that would be like a sign I'm going nuts or something. Because it's just so ingrained in who I am and what I am and my identity. I feel like it is those people who aren't musicians, who aren't, you know, videographers, people who do the business side of music. We need more of those types of people, and probably some financial backing to really be able to propel some of these people into what to achieve their full potential. These guys are knocking out tunes like No Tomorrow. People really like them, you know, they've got fan bases, and they just miss that one missing link, I think. Just that person who knows the business end, who knows how to market somebody and brand someone, and give them that sustainability, give them that like backing that, so they feel like, you know, I can give this 100% now, because a lot of people can't leave the job, or you know, they have other obligations that stop them from being able to do music because it doesn't make them money or enough money. They can't give it 100%, if that makes sense.
It was about 6 years later, 79, we started in Blackpool. I just commuted. It was far easier to start the stall there rather than diving into renting a shop. So I'd done a couple of years in Blackpool. We opened here in 81, and we've just been here since. Although we had a shop in Friargate as well, but we just wanted to be near the students, but it was a waste of time. Students didn't want to buy records and that. Yeah, I thought that was I was a bit too far away, and I was a bit too far this way from the students. But then I realised it was more just normal local people that actually supported the shop. And that's continued. It's very much the same thing, yeah. Oh, it was a big decision. It was a little shop adjoining next door here, where we started. And even that was a big decision, because you still had to go to solicitors and get a lease and do everything. And I'd never done anything like that before, so it was a big... And obviously, I had to sign off the door when I started doing all this, you know. I couldn't... Yeah, I had to rely on the little money I made. It's a big gamble, you know, it's a big gamble.
I did law at Uni Hertfordshire a decade ago, and while I got my 2-1, I absolutely hated doing it. Really, the only fields I liked doing were to do with the field of music, which are contracts and intellectual property, that was it. To be honest, I do feel like the human rights work might be tied into my music down the line anyway, because I do feel it has a special place in my heart given my story up until now. But I do imagine that I'd be doing so as either a charity worker or a legal professional. That last bit scares me because I hate the field of law. I genuinely do.
The first earliest gig I think I ever did was in Longton, in the village hall. I met up with a trumpet player, well, a cornet player he was at the time. He's still around, George Jackson, but he stopped playing years ago. But he was like a dance band, and he couldn't improvise, but he could learn the songs and play the lead trumpet, and he could really swing, and play really, really good. So I occasionally used to write out an improvised solo for him to memorize. I was playing with this Joe Palin trio, and me on the saxophone, and Howard McGee, the big star. But we never met him until we got on the stage, and they announced it, Joe Palin trio, with Ron Parry on drums and Ian Taylor bass, Harold Salisbury on saxophone, and the great. And he walked on with his trumpet, and he went to the up and said, "Do you know Bag's Groove?" And I said, "Yeah." So we all played it, and we just played. He said, "Do you know such a tune?" "Yeah." And then off he went. After we'd done that gig, he unbent a little, and we went and he had a beer, and we were chatting to him, because he went out to California with Charlie Parker and stayed there for years. And we said, what happened like with Preston? He said, "Oh well." He said, he said you can lie on the beach, and play a bit of cool jazz at night and that. He said, but after a few years I got a bit bored. He said, but he said, I'll never forget this. I'll never forget his exact words. He said, when I went back to New York, he said, them cats was walking all over me. The fierce competition in New York, that is the centre of jazz in the world, New York. Them cats was walking all over me. But he said he preferred playing with us up north than when he did some gigs down in London and down in London. He said he preferred working with us up north. And I don't know why, because I knew a lot of these guys, and they will be asking, they'd want arrangements, they'd want rehearsals, he didn't want that. He just wanted to walk on with his trumpet like a jam session and play.
At one that I had the privilege of being a part of, they had Scorpio from Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, who is literally a legend in the game, pioneer of the music scene, and God knows how they managed to bag that, but for me that was quite a pivotal moment in my journey.
And Preston back in the 70s was great, the Guildhall. Well, everybody played there, but Bowie twice, within a matter of a few months, Bowie played it, but back at the top of the game, they had Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, they'd just every top name going. It was fantastic. It was at its absolute peak. 2 shows within a month, the Aladdin Sane, but still doing the Siggy one first, coming back doing Aladdin Sane, absolutely peak in a 2,000-seater. It was fantastic. No, memories like that, you just can't, you're so close to them as well. back in them days as well, they kept seats in. Whereas later on they allowed people to stand, but at the beginning it was all seated. So it was all quite proper like, but it was still very exciting, yeah. I still meet people in the shop that were at the same gigs. I've made friends from when I moved down here, you know, and they went to a lot of the same shows as me. So there is a lot of reminiscing goes on, plenty.
It was in Bartle Hall, and it was my first time drumming with a 6+ piece band that's been going on in Preston for yonks now, The Accused. Some of you might remember that name. How I chanced upon them was that the friend who volunteers here in the Wednesday music group plays with The Accused. And for a while they'd been secure in their membership. They'd been going for years. But then the drummer had to retire, a number of other musicians had to retire. Whoever stayed behind, they kept performing, and then they went from drummer to drummer to drummer, and they couldn't exactly find anyone, so they trialled me out instead. It was my first time drumming with that band. It was my first time drumming at a wedding, and I absolutely delivered.
Supporting a band called Shake, who were from the remnants of the Rezillos. I don't know if you remember the Rezillos. So we played with them at the Marquee in London, which was ace. Big buzz for that. And then we played a place called the Fan Club in Leeds, where we ended up, I don't know what we were doing, because we had no way, we managed to get a parent to drop us off with the gear. We had no idea how we were going to get home. We didn't care, we just wanted to get, once you got there, everything else was nothing, didn't matter. And we got chatting to these three brothers who had a massive converted sort of van, and they'd inherited a massive old mansion in Leeds, so we went back there, played music till 4 a.m, and they ended up playing on one of our singles later on in the year. So adventures, you know.
Well, I had the Magic Band on, Captain Beefheart's band, which was a big one for me. We had Lydia Lunch, we've had Ezra Thurman, Thorsten Moore from Sonic Youth came down one time. I mean, you know, it was some amazing stuff, really. I mean, I don't know if you know much about Rico and Tough Life Boogie, but some of the things he was bringing to us as well were just really interesting. We did this pop festival last year. We had the Bluebells headlining, and it was amazing, you know.
But you're really getting somewhere when people that you don't know ring you up and ask you to play with their band. And that's so. When I came out of the army, that would be 1956, I think, 50s. I went down to London, and I still only had a clarinet. Although I played the saxophone in the army band. The very first, I had a young trumpet player. He arranged up for me to stay in this boarding house with him, and so the first thing got hold of it when I got in to London, and I went to this house. Get the melody maker. Musicians wanted. There was one. This drummer wanted a clarinet player. And we were in Hornsey, North London, and he was only in Harringay, that the next, wasn't far away. So I went over, and he wasn't a bad drummer, and he had his own jazz club in Harringay, the Harringay Jazz Club. And like a lot of jazz musicians, he was a bit of an artist, and he did loads of cartoons for like the Rivali and the Sunday Times and things like that. Showed me. So anyway, I got there with the clarinet, and then he said, "Do you know Tishomingo Blues?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, play it. So I started playing it. I only played 2 bars, and he said, "You've got the job." He said, "You've got the sound. I could play the clarinet really well, you know." I was never really so very keen on becoming a professional, because when you're professional, it don't matter really. In the London Symphony Orchestra, you know, or Ackerbilt's Paramount Jazz Band. You're tired. You're tired. So, tomorrow night we're going up to Glasgow, and then we're coming back to the Chinese Jazz Club in London, in Brighton. I'd done that, and no, but I wanted more freedom, you know. I just wanted to be, and that's what I was. And I found that you know, jazz, it has its ups and downs. It has a time when it's becoming quite popular, or at least popular enough, you know, to get people to actually employ you and pay you money. Playing with people like Kenny Ball, I played with Kenny Ball at his pub, and I learned quite a bit from him.
It's hard to say who's the most prominent currently. I feel like it is a bit more of a level playing field to what maybe it once was. I'd say maybe Gizmo is the most popular artist that I'm aware of in the Preston scene, just in terms of like views and things like that. And I know he manages to get himself on established channels outside of Preston, where he gets like tens of thousands of views and stuff like that. And I think the reason why he's in that position is sheerly down to his ability. He's a really, really naturally talented artist, and not just a rapper, not just like a grime MC. He can play instruments, he can produce, he can play, you know, guitar and piano and ukulele, and he writes all his own songs, and he can sing. He's a really versatile artist, and out of everyone, I feel like if he pushed himself in the right way, he'd have the most chance to really become a mainstream success.
But I've always got, you know, big joy out of just going to see, even back in the day, Dandelion Adventure and things like that, when people turned out and the room was full. Big Red Bus, you know, when there was a lot of interest, things like that. Big Red Bus when they get support of the Stone Roses in the Guildhall in the foyer. You know, things like that. They're just like, they're kind of legendary stories now, a lot of these things. But they did happen. They're not just myths. But like I said, now, they're finally Evil Blizzard. I mean, they're really big, quite big in Britain now, Evil Blizzard. But they're all guys that just worked continuously. Never gave it up and come back to it. I mean, I knew Pete doing a Guild album, must have been like, don't know which Guild it would have been now, but yeah, they're reclaiming the Guild album. That was it, the local musicians all put a track each on the Guild album. I mean, that was great back in them days, but a lot of them same people are all still actually working, just continuously at it. But they're really dedicated, you know, and that's all you can really say. You just have to have it in your blood, really, to keep doing it. I think that's what it is.
The Warehouse got a lot of big bands on, you know, Joy Division, Crass, a lot of the big bands at the time played there. So we always used to manage to get support slots because my band, the Blank Students, were known because when we were playing on Peel, got played on John Peel, and we eventually got a session on Peel. But like loads of other places, you know, these kind of things will flourish. You know, you'll always get. You don't bother about it at the time. You're too enthusiastic about. You're too busy rehearsing. You're too busy hustling to get a gig. There wasn't a lot of places to play in Preston then. It was, you end up playing at the school, at your secondary school, at someone's house, just anywhere. And the motivation is the next gig. You know, not. I mean, we sent our first tape recorded here, on that, in here, sent it to Edinburgh. First cassette we ever sent to a record company. And we got a record deal. I thought, oh, it's easy, isn't it? That's all you do, send a cassette off.
Piece of paste.
Yeah. You know, we got Single of the Week in the NME. We did a Peel session, and you think that you're going to get a little bit further where you'll get more work, and it just never happened. You know, I don't know why. Obviously, nobody thought we were good enough to take that next step, but you know, it was great fun. You know, it's just because everything's new, isn't it? Everything's new. There was one experience which was shattering because we knew it's the Scottish connection with Fast Records. The Rezillos wanted a support act at Blackburn King George's, and they were they were on top of the pops then. You know, they were well known. And it was the morning of the gig, and I was walking up to our manager's house, and he was walking down the road doing this. He's off. It was awful. Not because you think it's the moment you're going to be famous. You're not thinking about being famous, but you think it might be a moment that's going to get you more work, more exposure, so you don't have to go to college and do a terrible job.
Oh, all of a sudden, everything started going pear-shaped. From the jazz point of view, Lonnie Donegan left Chris Barber band and formed his own skiffle group, as they called it, the Rock Island Line, and then Nancy Whiskey and Chas McDevitt. And it started going into rock and roll, rhythm and blues, and then it just, there was nothing but that boy bands and whatever. And all played all the same, guitars and very primitive music, sort of music. Then this company that owned all the property around Hackney, lots of property, they gave us 28 days notice to get out of this flat because they were refurbishing them all, doing them all up. Gentrification was happening around that. Then my wife got pregnant. That's how we came back to live in Preston.
It is tough at times, especially if you are going for, you know, I want to be a mainstream success, I want to be on big stages, I want to be on the radio. These are things that are extremely, extremely difficult to hard to come by. And I do feel like a lot of the time to obtain those things, you have to lose a bit of yourself to be what everyone wants you to be, which is something I've never really considered ever doing. A great example is Skeps. Skeps is a guy who, back in the DY days, which is arguably the most popular the Preston music, you know, rap scene has been, Skeps was almost like the top guy, like head and shoulders above the rest, even in terms of how he was perceived by people. He did things like Fire in the Streets, which was like a BBC Radio 1 Extra Charlie Sloth video series, and he was on like major channels, and he was getting all these views, and people genuinely loved him. Like, I was a really big fan of Skeps as I came up, and I was inspired by him as well. And I'm not sure what it was, but he decided, you know, enough was enough, and he'd had his day, and he didn't want to carry on pursuing it. And it's really sad. It's really, really sad, because you just feel like why does nobody see him? You know, why does somebody outside of, you know, Preston, who actually has the clout and the means to push somebody, why did nobody get to him? It is sad, and it is really tough, and very mentally and physically and emotionally draining sometimes.
We wouldn't be doing many new things because it's so hard. You've got to be very dedicated to try launching a new act now. It's mainly a friend thing, and I've dealt with the same people, you know, Mark and all these from back years ago when we first started doing the Bill Radleys and then Dandelion Adventure, and then a lot of these bands, Big Red Bus and them. But these people, to be honest, they're actually still creating music, and important music, not just in the bedrooms or anything. It's still quite important.
I mean, I felt like there wasn't any opportunities for me to begin with, but bear in mind, when I came to Preston, it was 2013, and up until November of last year, those were some pretty dark times. And if I had not known my way around, thanks to friends who knew their way around, I wouldn't have known anything at all, and I would have believed that there would have been no opportunity for me whatsoever. So, to put a long story short, up until November of last year, I was an asylum seeker. I'd recently been given the right to remain. So that meant I couldn't work. That meant I couldn't exactly take gigs. So I wanted to go and find open mics, but I didn't know where they were. I didn't know my lay of the land.
There was lots of animosity, jealousy, envy. Unfortunately, we always helped any band that we liked. We saw a band and we got them to record here, did some demos for them here, let them support us. We were always. I've been attacked by other band members because of, you know. So I'm sure that happens everywhere.
I was playing that what they call Dixieland jazz with this Sam Greenall. He had his own band, and we had several quite well-known, famous American guests, and also the British trumpet player Nat Ganella. He used to come in and sit in, play with us to keep his living. He was living in Leyland. And we had Peanuts, Hucko, and people like that. Frank, that was another one that shut down. The police raided it and found somebody smoking funny woodbines. So, and the same thing happened at the Hoppers. They got a new sergeant or something at Preston Police, and he heard about they ran these jazz nights on a Friday, yeah, and they let anybody just come in, not members of the rugby club. So this guy sent 2 women PCs on a Friday, and they would see non-members coming in and drinking alcohol. Oh. So they threatened to shut it down if they didn't stop. So that killed the jazz. I used to play one of the best bands I played with them was called Free Parking, and we had a regular gig at the Lamb Hotel, bottom of Church Street. There was pop groups on Saturday. We played there every Sunday. Trad Jazz, Silver Bell every Friday. Gary had a band, and he was a very good pianist, although I wasn't quite to ever liking him. Him and his friend, he had a friend, they went to school together. His friend played guitar. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant guitarist he was. Brilliant.
The Ferret has been one that I know has been massive in the urban scene, especially recently. And I did quite a lot of stuff there when I first started out. There's a place, I'm not sure how much urban stuff it does anymore, but there was a group called Shutter TV, and what they did was host events for these urban artists, and they did a fantastic job of it, and they've hosted a lot of their events at a place called Tonic, which is near the bus station. And they put on some really, really good events. You know, they had some decent names from across the country, and you have places like Ships and Giggles. I know they're quite a youthful, urban-y sort of thing. Adelphi's another good one. They do a lot of like drum and bass nights, and that's a big part of it. A lot of people who were once into rap and grime have transitioned into drum and bass and things like that. I think if you're looking at rap and where the scene has most thrived is probably in online spaces like YouTube, and that's developed over years and years. So it did start off mainly with like Triple C and CCY, and then other groups emerged, clashing and battling each other, which got them quite a lot of attention and quite popular in songs like Preston City, which is a really big Door Boy and Chambo song. I think it's got like 1 million views at this point. And that kind of progressed, and then a guy came along called Danny who does DY Media, and he really made a difference. He brought all the artists together from all the different groups and give them an individual platform for them to release their things, and of course there were other people who did better than others, like stars of the channel, like Skeps and Mondo and Gizmo. The people who were already quite well known did really well on there, but it brought up a lot of people who nobody knew about as well. It's aggressive, it's raw, it's passionate, it's full of punchlines and metaphors. It's very Preston, you know. A lot of other artists tend to like try and be Americanized or try to rap like they're from London and stuff like that. Whereas I think this Preston grime sound is quite original for Preston, you know, and it keeps the Preston accent and keeps it very northern and Lancashire.
We rented one half of next door, then the other half became available, so we rented that as well, same landlord. And then a few years later, this big shop became available. So we took that over and left the dance shop next door because the dance scene had really took off. We all, after the Roses and all them bands and this piano tune thing and all the raves. So it became a huge scene. So that was fantastic for us as well. So we had a few girls working next door and then I looked after this more the rock indie type side. That's more my thing. But yeah, that was good because there were good times there, and there was a lot of activity about, you know, a lot of field nights and, you know, rave nights all down over at the university. So there's a lot happening there. Yeah, I mean, people feel Leeds come over here doing nights because they knew. I mean, again, with Preston having this central thing from Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool, you did attract a lot of people like that. It's like at one time. Preston, we had Clouds, and then we'd a lot of other venues, the Warehouse still putting gigs on, the Paradise Club, the back down side of Clouds. When I was doing orders in London, people were just saying, what's happening in Preston? It's so much happening, and pulling coach loads in from Liverpool. It's just great. A lot of gigs on. Every venue was basically down to the individuals. Yeah, it was like, say, when Pete took over Pete that owns Blitz, he took over the Warehouse from Russell. Both them were even dedicated to putting live music on. It wasn't just a nightclub then, it was a live venue. You had the Paradise Club with the Maguire sisters and Steve. They were dedicated to putting bands on. One of the first early folk gigs was down there, you know, and then you'd Ronnie Brown and Trevor and all them doing Clouds. And they were just bringing them, you know, the Cult and all these. They were just bringing loads of great bands down there. So it was fantastic. A lot to choose from. Yeah, there's still people. They're all the Ferret and they're roaming down the Conti and Pete's at Blitz now, and all these people. They're still trying to do stuff. You know, the Plough out the back of there, the Market Street Social. But I mean, the people they're still trying, but it's very hard. Promoting shows, especially nowadays, you know, everything's expensive now, but they are willing to keep trying at it. But Pete's still very much into his music, which is fantastic because you really need people dedicated. You know, you can't just have people in it for the glory, because most of it is just pure hard work. And I mean, there might be a wee bit of glory, but most of it is just slog and up and downs.
It was a dump. It was just somewhere for people to get off the train and get a train to somewhere nicer. It's always been known as parochial, you know, as I said to you earlier, it's James last on at the Guildhall every 10 minutes. It's always suffered as it's geographically because of its closeness to proximity to Manchester, Liverpool, and even Lancaster. Lancaster was a far cooler place to go and play, so we did. So it's always been a bit fuddy-duddy, old parochial Preston.
And so I found the weekly music group that gathers here, and I flourished with them for a while. I wound up recording some of my own stuff with them. But really, it was only through knowing one of the people who attends that music group, Greg Slater. He knew his way around pubs. He had been performing for goodness knows how long. It was he, really, who took me to places. I wouldn't have known any of that without him. And very few venues really advertise themselves. Very few venues even draw people in. And my experience with music groups, unless they're doing an openly voluntary thing like in the Preston Arts Festival that's going on right now, unless they're doing a come and see sort of day, you don't get the impression that they're looking for new people, and they don't give the impression that they're looking for new people. Preston is home for me, and I wouldn't see it differently right now. Musically, I don't know. It depends on the field. Because as it happens, I produce music online. That's where the bulk of my musicianship is right now. I do perform live with bands and on my own, and I am involved with liturgical music. In the way of liturgical music, let's just say Preston is well covered. One of my strongest influences is based in Preston. I wouldn't have it any other way. But with the other things, I feel like I'm walking a solitary road. Musically speaking, I've been finding, apart from maybe a few exceptions, I've been finding it difficult to relate to people. I've been finding it difficult to find an event that really inspires me and others, and something that would make me think, yeah, I do want to go to that. I've not had that feeling. It's always been dismal. It always gave me the impression that everything was done with as little thought as possible. Whether it's done privately through a venue or publicly through the council. Because I could easily tell you things from, say, a digital fusion musician's perspective. I could easily tell you things from a video game musician's perspective. But all these things do not happen locally in Preston. I'm yet to see an actual game jam take place, hosted by UClan, where, people from Preston can actually take part. I'm yet to see something like that publicly advertised. Yorkshire have beaten us to the punch. York, Leeds, Newcastle have beaten us to the punch on this one. They have physical events. These are things that would easily gather together any bedroom producer of any age, and yet we don't see this happening. That's just an example. There's a lack of imagination, and that much is clear to see.
Pete and Gary, they were a bit older than us lot. They opened the first punk club in Preston under the Jolly Farmer. Do you remember the Jolly Farmer? Massive pub on the corner of Orchard Street, massive. It's very trendy, sort of towny pub, and he managed to get the cellar. So the night was called Downstairs. So we all became members of that. My band played there, loads of bands. We got bands from Bolton, all sorts of bands that played there. What were they called? There's a band from Bolton, and the big hit was Hang Myra Hindley. That was always a big hitter. You couldn't do that now, would you? But it was difficult because this was the summer of '77, where unfortunately the rags called the Daily Mirror and the Sun was starting to promote the violence coming from the King's Road between Teddy Boys and punks, and then, like most people without a brain, we started getting set upon. We come to the bus station, you get set upon by all what they call the soul fans. So because there's too much trouble there, then he moved it out to the Afro-Caribbean club, Gelgos. So that was the next stage. We had some great bands there. We organised bands there's a band from Edinburgh called The Scars. They're on Fast Records. I don't know if you know Fast Records. First Human League single was on. My band were on Fast. We were actually in the studio in Rochdale when the Human League were doing Being Boiled. So that's how we met them. So we used to get bands who were on Fast Records. We'd do exchanges. We'd go and play in Edinburgh. They'd put us up. They'd come down to Preston. We'd feed them and he'd stay here. Loads of people stayed in this house, The first selection obviously was lots and lots of young people, because don't forget there's no kind of social networking. You found out about people by seeing them on the bus. We saw two girls who were punks. We got off the bus and talked to them because they were punks. And then you meet up in a cafe. There's a cafe in Preston, and everyone used to hang out there drinking one cup of coffee to last all day because we had no money. The Palace Cafe. It's now Toto's Greek restaurant. It was upstairs, and they had a record shop downstairs where I used to buy really cheap Frank Zappa imports, which are now priceless. They were like imports nobody wanted. So it's all organic. I mean, you know, it's just young kids discovering alcohol and the opposite sex and enjoying the music. It's the music that's... And bands were formed on nights at the Jolly Farm at downstairs and at Gelgos, and then eventually it moved to the warehouse. The warehouse obviously was a big central point, you know, a little bit later. I'd say I'm into the scene more now than I've been for years, because in the 90s we had places like the Adelphi that had a great venue upstairs. We had Baby Bird there, what they call Catatonia, Jackie Levine, you know, and I suppose it gets a bit more professional. And with the Ferret opening, I've seen loads and loads of fantastic local bands. I mean, but the difference is that they can all play really well. They've all got loads of money, or they've got rich parents. It's nothing like it was. I mean, they are fabulous. The culture of it's changed a bit, where maybe it's more about how good you can play, more as opposed to what you've got to say. And it is a different world, but it's either good or it isn't. And I've seen lots of, you know, certainly at the Ferret, they're putting on younger bands now because they need to try and get people in because of COVID. They've lost 2 years.
There's a few. There's a band called Left. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're playing a lot of gigs at the moment, and they're sort of really exciting. Kind of punk band, basically, you know, but with a bit of a contemporary edge to them, you know. So they're very exciting. Just energy and you know, a bit of anger, you know, sort of slightly unhinged feel to it, and it's electrifying kind of performance, you know. And the lead singer Rick's got this amazing charisma, you know. I think just today, with the way the media is and the way how far to the right the culture's generally gone, I don't think they get past the gatekeepers. They wouldn't get on Radio 1 or, you know, Radio Luxembourg even, you know, now. I don't think, you know, you wouldn't get past those gatekeepers. You know, it has to be. I think the approach has to be more DIY and using online now and YouTube and things like that, unfortunately. I think that's probably the way for up and coming ones to go, you know. Who else is there? I mean, there's Empire Police who are doing quite well for themselves at the moment. They've just organised a big one-day festival with them in June. So a lot of other local bands. Well, we can give them a gig, basically, and then that's the exposure that goes with it. And we do, you know, fairly good marketing, I think, within the limits. And we have quite a wide social media reach and a lot of engaged, you know, people. So, you know, whenever I put a punk gig on, there's always... They don't always do spectacularly well, you know, but there's always interest, you know. But a lot of the people come to the punk gigs are still punks from then, but they haven't really changed, you know. They've still wearing the same outfits and stuff. And they're the real faithful, you know. They'll come to anything. I mean, another artist that I really like, Preston artist, you know, Polly Pores, Stephen Buckley. I mean, I think he deserves to go a long way, but I mean, that's very different to what, you know, Left are doing, or Empire Police, obviously. And there's people like Carl Brown as well. I don't know if you know Carl Brown and their records. You know, he's brought a few interesting artists to me who've, you know... I think there is a lot of sharing in the scene, and, you know, it's quite a small world, so, you know, you have one band on and you have another band supporting, and of course it turns out they know each other, you know what I mean, and then they'll know me sound man already because they've done the Ferret, and so it is quite a... Yeah, it's a smallish but, you know, friendly scene, you know.
And maybe a few other venues, maybe the uni doing a bit more, open to the public, not just for the students. Yeah, I mean, it was a major blow when we lost 53 degrees down the stair. The little room up the stairwell, Blitz is as big as that, so that's no big deal. But we're seriously, that was a tremendous blow. Apart from topping the Guildhall, obviously the biggest, like, that was the worst thing. But at least with 53 degrees down the stair, that was a fantastic venue. We had Public Image when Adamant come back and all these. They were fantastic shows. But then they shut it down. Said there was no interest. Which was like... But then again, saying that, you've also got to be trying to get in with the good agents. SGM. You've got to be in the books with these agents to get the bands. I've had loads of discussions with people about this already, because, I mean, obviously you'll have heard about the Amethyst Club. The trouble is those people that went to these, I only caught that at the very end, because I only came down here at 72, 73. So I missed the heyday when, like, Genesis and Van der Graaf, Hawkwind played it. But those people now, you know, they're all dying off now, and it must be really hard to try and find out. I mean, the book exists, so all the stories are there. But even before that, there was a lot of clubs in Preston, and it's very hard to find anybody that can definitely give you the right story about them. People seem to think it was here, or somebody else thinks it was there. Yeah, like there was a Stax Club up the top of the road there, the Black Bull, the Stax Club. The door's still there, but there's so few people left living from that period in the 60s. Yeah, when the Small Faces played above one of them buildings. And I don't know. But now, yeah, it's keeping a recording now and a document of now, what's happening now.
There's a couple of ladies from round Ashton, and they were talking about this, about my work, you know, and I had to do some of this thing. I finished. I've got a fairly decent pension now, because not from music, I finished up being a jig and tool inspector at English Electric Reinforced Plastic. So she said, oh, she said, so you weren't a sheet metal worker or an inspector, engineering inspector, who was moonlighting as a jazz musician. She said, he was a jazz musician, daylighting as a, she said, daylighting as a sheet metal worker and an inspector. And I thought, that sums it up.
Is off. Oh, nipper, no sir, no. Kipper, no sir, no. Skipper, no sir.
Storm of a different place, rain upon hand. Well, I little open boy on my one day. There's only a bit of thing for bad people.
This is the furthest I could go, providing I can pretend I don't want to know. Stop telling me it's alright, telling me that I can go another night.
Alcohol all day, your liver run dry. Rerun this can't you jump this high? Rip the ring.
I drink on my own. I don't sleep with nobody. I gave away my phone.
I was born on this estate, and I've been dreaming loads these days. There must be more than broken bits of people in these streets. Follow their feet, seems like no one here has dreams that they can talk about with me.
especially we were housed in regret, cause they weren't maintained, so the houses decayed. We got arrested from young if we were out with a vet. Can't tell us how to behave, that's not how we were raised. It's not down for debate, and we're out in the rain. Tea time comes, mum shouting your name, you're not allowed to be late.
I'm older than I was before. Constellations are growing old while we're reconsidering life. Teenage worries and sorrows galore. No more, no more.
Do you like my wings?
Of two young girls and a young woman, I guess a married or split family gone sudden. But where are they now? It's just a mystery. It must have been something to do with this guy's history.
I've been fucked in the ass for peace in the Middle East, and frankly, it's the least I could do. I said, baby, you didn't need to lie to me.
Skipper, listen.
But it creates the feeling that something can be done. Yes.